Iran and the United States are on the verge of reaching a formal agreement. The effort to renew the arms control agreement faces a number of challenges, including geopolitics related to Iran's nuclear program and the war in Ukraine. The Iran nuclear deal, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), is an important agreement reached in July 2015 between Iran and many world powers, including the United States. Under the terms of the agreement, Iran agreed to cancel several concessions, opening its nuclear program and facilities to wide international scrutiny in exchange for billions of dollars in sanctions. Supporters of the agreement say it will help prevent the resumption of Iran's nuclear weapons program and reduce the risk of conflict between Iran and its rivals in the region, including Israel and Saudi Arabia. However, the deal has been in jeopardy since President Donald Trump withdrew the U.S. in 2018. Iran restarted its nuclear program in retaliation for the U.S. withdrawal and deadly attacks on leading Iranians in 2020. In early 2023, United Nations investigators announced that Iran was enriching uranium, causing international concern. President Joe Biden said the United States would return to the deal if Iran complied again, and after 2 years of non-stop talks, the two countries seemed close to being illegal for a while. The Iran nuclear deal, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), is a landmark agreement reached in July 2015 between Iran and several world powers, including the United States. Under the terms of the agreement, Iran agreed to cancel most of its contracts, will open its nuclear program and facilities to broad international scrutiny in exchange for billions of dollars in sanctions. Supporters of the agreement say it will help prevent the resumption of Iran's nuclear weapons program and reduce the risk of conflict between Iran and its rivals in the region, including Israel and Saudi Arabia. However, the deal has been in jeopardy since President Donald Trump withdrew the U.S. from the deal in 2018. With the U.S. gone and launching deadly attacks on prominent Iranians in the 2020s, including one launched by the U.S., Iran has restarted its nuclear program. In early 2023, United Nations investigators announced that Iran was enriching uranium, causing international concern. President Joe Biden said the United States would return to the deal if Iran complied again, and after 2 years of non-stop talks, the two countries seemed close to being illegal for a while. What is the purpose? The P5+1 is so keen to destroy Iran's nuclear program that if Tehran decides to develop nuclear weapons, it will take at least a year, giving world powers time to respond. Before entering the JCPOA negotiations, U.S. officials had estimated that without a deal, Iran would be able to produce enough nuclear material to make weapons within months. The Islamic Republic of Iran signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (COEP) with China, France, Germany, Russia, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union, in which Iran will implement significant and identifiable restrictions in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. Many observers hailed the agreement as an important, albeit flawed, tool to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The United States, our partners, and the world are safer thanks to COEP, said former U.S. President Barack Obama. It goes without saying that criticism of the U.S. agreement is not lacking. Republicans and Democrats in Congress have voiced their opposition during and after the JCPOA negotiations. Bob Corker, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, argued that the JCPOA would harm those who support terrorism in the world and reduce our ability to stop it. Of course, U.S. President Donald Trump called it the worst decision. Although there are 8 signatories to the treaty, 2 of them, Iran and the United States, are relatives. For Iran, the JCPOA removed economic and financial support from the United Nations, the United States, and Europe, which caused inflation of more than 20% annually and caused the Iranian economy to collapse by 6% from 2012 to Iran. 2015, Iran's economy grew by about 5%. Iran's economy has grown by about 5% per year over the last 12 years. For the United States, it sets a clear, albeit temporary, limit to Iran's nuclear science and engineering and Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons. While the JCPOA is not a treaty, U.S. law requires the U.S. President to certify Iran's compliance with its KOEP obligations every 90 days, and continue to waive sanctions against Iran. Not surprisingly, Trump refused to show that it was in the U.S.'s interest to comply with the COEP, without making it clear on October 13 that Iran did not comply with the COEP. Trump also threatened to withdraw from the agreement if Congress and U.S. allies failed to present an enhanced JCPOA, which Tehran would accept. This means getting rid of punishment completely. Now that Trump has decided to revoke the order, Congress faces the choice of whether to reimpose sanctions on Iran. Determining what impact Trump's decision will have requires examining the details of the alleged plan. Rumor has it that the accreditation plan has 3 main elements. One is procedural and the other is fundamental. As Trump has made clear, the White House denial plan is an attempt to force major changes in Iran's foreign policy. Revocation of accreditation without withdrawal. First, procedure. Revocation of the certificate by itself does not mean that the U.S. has withdrawn from the convention. Trump specifically refused to show that the extension of the exemption was consistent with Iran's behavior and interests in the United States, and he did not admit that Iran violated the provisions of the JCPOA. As Trump points out, although Iran violated its oil reserves twice, in both cases the violations were deemed insignificant. They did not increase Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons and were quickly corrected. The president began to bring this matter to Congress, saying that this treaty as written was not in America's interest. Work with America's friends to have it rewritten or we will remove it. President Trump is essentially putting pressure on Tehran. The decision to withdraw is an assertion that the Iranian government has had enough of the economic pain and threat of withdrawal, promised by new economic sanctions and economic uncertainty, and will completely adjust foreign behavior to avoid these consequences. President Trump's efforts to change Iran's foreign policy behavior will fail for at least 2 reasons. First, the pain of U.S. threats of intervention may not be enough to bring about a change in Iranian foreign policy. Compared to what Iran would have to give up to avoid it, the strategy would fail without the economic threat. The second problem is that threats of sanctions may not be credible, for example, because Iran believes Trump is bluffing, or because congressional hawks do not have enough votes to pass the sanctions. Any threats from the White House? It is unclear whether Iran will fully reform its foreign policy to avoid economic and trade sanctions. It is important to understand that Iran's motivation for withdrawing its certification was not Iran's violation of the JCPOA. It largely complied with the agreement. Instead, the argument is that Iran's general foreign behavior is offensive and dangerous for the Middle East. It supports Hezbollah and other terrorist groups. It is trying to control the politics of Iraq and Syria and turn them into a puppet state. It threatens the region's only freedom, Israel, and America's Arab allies. It continues to develop and test advanced missiles and other weapons. Tehran's general policy focuses on military and political activities in the Middle East and Persian Gulf. Iran's neo-imperialist foreign policy cannot penetrate the US, and if the risk of continuing Iran's nuclear program means that the US could impose economic and financial punishment, it is worth it. No time for caprice. The White House's approach to Iran's foreign policy and COEP is an example of what is anti-justice. On paper, point out the flaws in the JCPOA and point out that negotiation is not only possible, but easy. The problem is that the weakening of Iran's commitment through sanctions underscores the logic of Tehran's imperialist foreign policy. The past 70 years have taught Iranian politics some hard lessons. Iraq, from the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran in 1941, despite Iran's official neutrality, to the overthrow of US-backed Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, who started the 25-year dictatorship of King Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The war in southern Iran in 1979. Iraq used chemical weapons against Iranian forces while the world remained silent, and the 20th century taught modern Iranian leaders that strength is better than no strength. This is not about defending Iran's foreign policy. Stay away. Iran visits Iraq, Syria, and other parts of the Middle East by a foreign power, foreign interference in its internal affairs. However, all-out US efforts to weaken Iran's economy, including regime change, have fueled the perception of Iranian conservatives that the world is a hostile environment and that the United States is an implacable and unreliable enemy. Iranian hawks will argue that the economy is not sufficient to have a nuclear arsenal, which guarantees Iran's physical security and assistance in its quest to control its neighbors, as a necessary policy as long as the country appears undeveloped. Then nuclear weapons time, foreign powers make plans to destroy the country. Iran conducts its foreign policy in line with its own interests. According to Iran's national security policy, we should ask whether they will halt these efforts to prevent new changes, the only way to maintain their political